Okay, you know me, so I have a little thing for you. I want you to talk to each other again, but this time it's short. It's a little one this time, okay? So don't get all into some giant conversation on me. Okay, I want you to just find one other person, ideally someone you don't know, but don't go traveling all over the sanctuary because we're keeping it short, remember? And if you're comfortable, please tell them your name, where you were born, and where your ancestors are from. Okay? Go. Okay, good job. If you can hear me, touch your nose. If you can hear me, touch your ear. If you can hear me, touch your chin. If you can hear me, touch your forehead and go. If you can hear me, please be quiet. Okay, so you'll understand why I did that in a few minutes, but I have some stories to share with you. My junior year in high school, I switched to a different school. I had been going to a public school, and I went to a private school. And a few weeks into the school year, I got called into the Office of Multicultural Affairs. And when I was there, I met the head of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and we chatted for a little while, and then she asked me, where was I born and where were my grandparents from? So I told her that my mom's mom was Italian and my mom's dad was English, like Mayflower English, and that my dad's mom was also Italian, and that my dad's dad was Cuban. She was very excited about the Cuban part. And she said, I would like to officially welcome you as a person of color to our school. Yes. So I was officially welcomed. And so I was kind of curious. I was like, what is the cutoff for when I wouldn't officially be welcomed as a person of color? And she said that if I had been any less than a quarter Cuban, I would not have been officially welcomed. So I was like, oh, okay. So I go home that night, and we're sitting around the dinner table, and I say, guess what I learned today at school, Mom and Dad? You know, and they're thinking like something about physics, or I don't know. I'm like, we're people of color! And they're like, who told you that? The Office of Multicultural Affairs has officially declared it. I am a Latina. So I got like little things in the mail about Latina gatherings and stuff, and I was definitely surprised and confused by this because I grew up in a predominantly white community in Connecticut, and I had never identified myself as Cuban or Latina. When my grandfather came from Cuba, he wanted his family to be very American, so he did not teach any of his children how to speak Spanish. So none of us spoke Spanish. We celebrated Epiphany, and we had an annual pig roast, but besides that, that was like pretty much all of our Cubanness. So when I went to college, again, I was identified as a person of color. This time I just got a letter in the mail. But still, I was like, okay, this time they only had my last name to go by. They hadn't even made sure I was the quarter Cuban, so after a while, I decided I better learn Spanish because all the telemarketers that were calling our house only spoke Spanish. And we couldn't answer them, and they'd be like, Garcia? And we'd be like, yep, no hablo español. So I minored in Spanish, and I decided I really wanted to go to Cuba, because this was like coming up as this important part of my heritage. So I did a summer study in Cuba, and when I was there, my grandfather visited for the first time since he had left. And my father came, and that was really special to have all these generations of our family there. But the thing that I thought was really strange was that we'd be like walking down the street, and like people would be like, you know, pardon me, I'm in your way, Blanco. Or like in the restaurant, like, what can I get you to eat, Blanco? And Blanco, do you want to buy some of my souvenirs? And since I minored in Spanish, I knew they were calling him white. And I was like, why are we in Cuba and they are calling my grandpa white? But then, 2 generations later, I'm in school going to the Office of Multicultural Affairs and learning that I'm a person of color because he was from Cuba. I was like, something is not quite working in our system here. And it's kind of funny, I appreciate the laughter, but it's also just kind of awkward and confusing, because we know that the schools had the best of intentions. They probably also felt a call, they wouldn't say from God, but to increase diversity. And so I believe they were trying to do that. But I also know that I don't think I'm the kind of diversity that they really needed to increase. I don't want this to be offensive, but I started to call myself kind of like safely diverse, you know, because I'm Sara Garcia and I'm a quarter Cuban, but I look like pretty much everyone else, and I had the same kind of background as pretty much everyone else, and so we weren't really bringing ourselves into contact with difference by me making it so we could check off the "we have Latina students" box. So that is something that I just continue to wonder about and think about, and especially now as we claim this call in our strategic plan of increasing diversity. And so I don't want us to do it that way. I don't want us to check off the box and really just be including people who are really similar to ourselves. I want us to be able to go outside the box for that diversity. But as I was thinking about that, I was like, well, wait a minute. We do actually have a lot of diversity here right now, right? I mean, when you guys asked each other where you were born and where you were from, there were a lot of different answers, right? I think so. And so you come from all over the city to come here. Some of you come from the suburbs, bless your hearts. I know that you speak a variety of languages. I know that you have actually a pretty wide diversity of beliefs and values along with our shared values. And so we do have diversity here. And so I think before we think about increasing diversity, we also have to start with celebrating the diversity that we have. And that has to start with us being open to each other and getting to know each other and talking to each other and sharing more of our lives with each other. And so that's part of why we have this hospitality task force looking into how do we really connect with each other. And it's part of why your bulletin looks like a small novel, because it lists all those things that people are doing together, because we want you to be with each other and do stuff together. So if you're one of the people who has only come and been involved on Sunday morning, I'm not trying to give you a guilt trip, but I do want to really strongly say, come to something besides Sunday morning. Come and be with your other church people at another time and get to know them. I think that is one of the first steps to us increasing diversity. And if you've already been coming to some other group, come to a new one. So this is my first task for you in our strategic plan going forward. Open yourselves up to each other. Get involved in some other way that you haven't been involved in before. And then we can talk about opening ourselves up to others. We have to do both if we want to increase diversity. And we've said we want diverse partnerships. So how crazy is it that last spring we said, okay, we want to increase our diversity, we want diverse partnerships, and then the UCC tells us, okay, there is a predominantly African American, predominantly LGBT church that needs a partner, and they give us that. And then in September, that church finds out that it's losing its space, not because of anything that they did, but losing their space. And as Pastor Jamie, the pastor of that church, is in a meeting with his leadership team about where do we go, Pastor Matt calls and says, come here. So they have been here. They have been worshiping in our chapel at 11:30 on Sunday mornings. And if you haven't gone to check it out, I hope that you will. Now, this is temporary, but we are going to discuss it at our October council meeting and decide if we should extend it. They want to buy their own building, but they could save up some money if they were here. And it does seem like a pretty amazing thing that we said, we want to have diverse partnerships. And then a group of African American gay people landed in our chapel. So I don't necessarily believe that God does such specific signs. I have a hard time with that. But I'm also like, whoa, okay, God, maybe you're speaking to us. So what is it going to take if they come and if they really stay here? It's going to be maybe a little uncomfortable. It's going to maybe be a little awkward sometimes. We love our chapel. It's gorgeous. And they've asked if they can use another room for their social gatherings, so they've been using the parlor. So do we want to give up the two most beautiful rooms in the church on Sunday morning? Probably some of us are like, no, we don't want to. And they're going to probably ask for more. If you give a mouse a cookie, he asks for another thing, right? I can't help but think of it. I've been reading that too much to my 4-year-old. But like, you share, you open the door to sharing, the door gets wider. It's one of the things we worry about and celebrate, right? And if they're here, if they stay, we're going to think to ourselves, like, we got to worship together. I've even already heard people saying that. But then it's like, whoa, what would that look like? If you, as I said, if you haven't gone down to see what their worship is like, you should. It is very different. And I went a few weeks ago, and their music is louder. And when the person is preaching, everyone is very vocal. So I grew up in like the nice frozen chosen Protestant tradition where you do not speak during the sermon. So I'm sitting in there at first and hearing like the preach it and hallelujah. And I'm like, oh gosh, what are they doing? And this one guy is going, yes, 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 which would feel very affirming if any of you want to shout that as I'm preaching. But I'm just sitting there like, no, you're not supposed to be talking. But then I was like, okay, my parents aren't here to be like, you're not being respectful in church. So like, you could get into this? Yeah, okay. I did not shout anything. But I was like, it looks like it feels really good to shout stuff in worship. So if we invite them to worship, maybe they're going to make some noise. Maybe some of us are going to sit here and feel like, oh, that is not what we're supposed to do in church. And it's going to feel kind of icky and weird and different. But is that worth it? To feel a little different? I think so. I think we would all say yes. but it doesn't make it feel less weird. It doesn't make it less scary. I think that for me, that fear of difference, that no, don't make things change, it comes from a place of fear. It's often, I think, for me about fear of losing something that I love, or fear of needing to protect something that I really want to hold on to. And it shows up as kind of like that nauseous feeling in my stomach, or like that knot in my chest of like, oh, this is going to shake things up. I don't know if I can take it. One of the places where I sometimes feel that, and I want to call it out because I think it's important, is I feel it in coffee hour. I get scared in coffee hour. I am going to admit that. I know some of you feel it too. That I'm like, okay, what if I don't know those people? What if I'm like, hey! And I walk up to that person, I'm like, no, I have actually never met that person before. Or I'm like talking to them and thinking like, oh, I know this about them, and I'm going like blah, 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 and then it's like, oh no, you do not have the children that I am talking about. So it's easier to just kind of hang back. I've watched us all do it. I'm not trying to shame you into this, I'm just trying to name it and be real about it. We have visitors that come and they say, oh, we went to coffee hour and it seemed so cliquey and nobody talked to us. And we came for weeks and no one ever said hello. And so maybe not all of it is fear, maybe just some of it is comfort. But I think if we're gonna open ourselves up to each other and then open ourselves up to Lighthouse, like say, like we feel weird in coffee hour, just us, and then if Lighthouse comes to coffee hour, what are we gonna do? We have to be able to talk to each other. We have to be able to take that risk to connect with each other. And it is a risk. It is a risk we're taking. But we've heard that God is calling us to that risk. And we've heard also God encouraging us and comforting us in the midst of our fears or resistance, because we might see other people's as different. Everything in our world teaches us to see others as different and to separate ourselves and to be afraid of each other. And so we live in this headspace of other, apart from, me and them. And there's something so beautiful about our scripture passage from this morning, just talking about how we're all part of this body. I'm going to read it again for you. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as he chose. So we are, all of us, one body in Christ. St. Paul's and Lighthouse, we are already a body. And maybe without them before, we were missing an ear and some internal organs, and they're missing a leg. And together we're gonna be more whole. We're gonna experience life more fully than before, when we were dismembered and disjointed. And I think it's gonna be exhilarating to discover a new kind of wholeness, to have differences and to be challenged. It's not always fun, but I think it will make us all feel so much more alive. So step one was we open ourselves up to each other. Try something new in the church to meet other people that you haven't tried before. Open ourselves up beyond this church. Let's see what it would be like to really welcome Lighthouse in. And then 3, let's look at the barriers. Let's not pretend they're not there. Let's really look at them. See where the resistance is. See where the fear is. So we can let them go. Because they're not really there anyway in this one body. So I want to take one more minute. And if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes. And I'd like you to see if you can feel in yourself when I say there will be change. Some things may be different. There will be strangers. Where in you does that cause a little unrest? Feel it, just feel it. Don't tell yourself you're not allowed to feel it or you have to be open and welcoming, but where is that place in you where you can see the resistance? Let yourself know it and acknowledge it and not say it shouldn't be there, but just to say, here it is. This is the part of me that doesn't want things to change. This is the part of me that doesn't want to see the stranger. This is the part of me that doesn't want anything different. And hear the words that we are one body. We are one. Hear that God is the God of love who created all of us, who changes things all the time, and who is sending that love into you to melt and to heal the places where there is fear and a wall and pain. And I invite you, just for a moment, to imagine even just the possibility that God's love is strong enough to melt any of your fears. That God's love is strong enough to break down any walls that we think are separating us. That there is enough and more than enough love for all of us. And we will share it with each other and with those we've never even met. May you just bathe in the fullness of God's love right now. And from that place, let us open ourselves up to each other and to those beyond this place. Amen.